What's going on, everyone? Jeremy Gray here, and in today's video I have sort of a controversial subject to talk about. I want to talk about prime lenses versus zoom lenses. Some people prefer one over the other. I personally love both and own both and have different needs for each type of lens. And with me today I have a 35mm prime and a 16-35 zoom lens, and I want to compare the two and give some examples and just talk about what scenarios I would use each lens. So let's get into it. Alright, so before we even get into the video, I do want to say there's no right or wrong. Primes are not better than zooms. Zooms are not better than primes. It all depends what you need for your specific shooting style. And I also want to make a note of what I'm currently shooting on is the Nikon Z6 and mounted on it the 35mm f1.8 S-line lens for the Z mount. Spectacular lens. I've got a wide open at f1.8 because I've got a variable neutral density filter on the front of the lens, and it just looks great in my opinion. And that's the first thing we'll talk about. We're going to talk about aperture, because typically a prime lens is going to have a much wider aperture than, say, a zoom lens, which is one of the main selling points of a prime lens, is having that wide aperture, so you get the better bokeh and the really nice low light performance. It just looks nice overall. So in just a little bit, I'm going to compare this 35 prime with my old 16-35 zoom lens. This got the adapter on it, that's why it looks so big, because it's an F-mount lens and it's f4. So let's go over some small pros and cons for each style of lens, because I just feel like that's something we should get out of the way, because there is pros and cons to each type of lens. First and foremost, let's go over size. Typically, prime lenses are significantly smaller than zoom lenses. Just comparing the two lenses I mentioned earlier, the zoom, the 16-35 with the adapter on, is more than twice the weight of this 35 prime. Without the adapter, the zoom lens is about 300 grams more. This prime sits around 380 grams, and the zoom is like 680, and with the adapter, it's like 840 grams. And that is a significant difference in weight, especially if you're traveling and trying to pack light. Now, something that contributes to this weight is the amount of glass elements in the lens. Zoom lenses, so they have the ability to zoom, typically have a lot more glass elements than, say, a prime does. A zoom lens could have like 22 elements, whereas some of the older primes have like 8 or 7 elements, and that is a big difference. And it's also a reason that your image will probably look a lot cleaner on a prime lens, because the less glass the light has to travel through, the cleaner the image is going to be, and it's just going to look much, much better, in my opinion. All right, another pro versus con is going to be the price. Now, just like the weight, there's typically a big difference in price. And just like the weight, the primes tend to be much cheaper, just like they're much lighter. But that's not always the case, of course, because there are some very, very expensive prime lenses out there. But if you're looking at the normal primes versus the pro zooms, there's usually a big difference, because the image that you can get out of a prime like this one, the 35, this lens runs about 850 bucks, is spectacular. But then if you look at like a 24-70 zoom by Nikon, say, they're about $2,700, and that is a ton of money for one lens. And for a professional, it's not that much money, obviously. But if you're just starting out, you're probably invest in a prime. I know most photographers' first lens after the kit, if they get the kit lens, is usually a nifty 50, a 50mm 1.8. That was my first lens. I bought a Nikon D3000 12 or 13 years ago, and a couple of months later I bought a 50mm f1.8 prime, and I loved it. The thing cost like 150 bucks or something at the time, and I thought it was great, and that's why most people opt to do that. I'm sure that lens would even still perform great as long as you know what you're doing, because it's more about the photographer, not the camera. But the question remains, should you throw all your money at an array of primes and have like your own little artillery of primes, or should you throw it all at 1 or 2 really nice zoom lenses? It really depends on your needs. All right, another pro versus con is going to straight up be the ability to zoom in or out with a zoom lens. And what I mean by that is sometimes in certain scenarios, having a prime would put you at a major disadvantage, because maybe you can't get closer to your subject and you need to zoom. So having, say, a 24-70 is extremely helpful instead of having just a 35 or a 50 or even just an 85 prime, because you can't get any closer than, say, maybe there's a barricade there, or maybe there's limitations in the church that you're shooting in for a wedding, so a zoom would be very helpful then. Now there's the big argument that primes make you move your legs, but again, like I said, what if you can't? But to counter it, what if you can? So taking a prime is typically gonna have you really focus on your composition instead of just standing there and zooming in, zooming out. Looks good, zoom in. That looks good too. Snap, snap, snap at every focal length you can imagine. Turn that way, zoom, zoom, zoom. With a prime, you're probably gonna be like moving around, getting lower, dropping, get on the ground, lay down. I mean, I don't know. You're gonna get creative and you're gonna try to build your composition more than just like stand there and play with the focal lengths. And that in and of itself is gonna make you a better photographer and a lot more creative using the prime. I should clarify, using the prime. I think primes really make you more creative because zooms tend to make you lazy, but I also know that zooms have their major place in certain scenarios. I'm gonna explain to you right now why I chose to use zooms when I was shooting weddings. All right, so what kind of changed for me was when I started shooting weddings professionally full time. Now, I know plenty of photographers who shoot just primes for the most part at weddings, and that is awesome, and I respect that. But for the style of photography we were going for, I found zooms to be much more useful, and that's just potatoes. That is your opinion, that is your way of shooting at the job, and that's totally fine. The way that the studio that I worked with liked to shoot was very photojournalistic and documentary style for the wedding day, and I would say that 8 out of 10 clients hired us because we were kind of fly on the wall, out of your faces, and the zoom lenses were very, very helpful in that aspect. So when I first started shooting, I picked up 2 lenses. I bought a 24-70 2.8 and a 70-200 2.8, and I rocked those lenses all day long at weddings. I very rarely grabbed any of the other lenses out of the bags unless I had a really specific need to. Eventually, I bought my 16-35 prime, and that gave me a really nice option for, say, like the dance floor to get some creative portraits on the dance floor. I mean, dance floor stuff is really, really boring. I'm sorry, everyone. But listen, because of the zoom, it was very helpful, and I liked being able to stay out of their faces for certain circumstances at the wedding, most particularly being the ceremony. I rocked the 70-200 during the ceremony so I could stay far away from them and they can have their intimate moments. And I know we're there to capture the day, so there's times where you gotta get in there and get the shot. But the zoom lens allowed me to kind of keep my distance a little bit and give them a little bit more intimacy to themselves, and I think that they appreciated that. And it worked out in the end. So now that we've covered why and when I liked zoom lenses, I want to talk now about why I like prime lenses. So let's get into it. So once I was done shooting weddings, I moved on to trying to do travel and landscape photography, in which case I usually found myself hiking with the 16-35 f4 lens and the 70-200 2.8 zoom lens, both very heavy lenses, both made my bag much heavier, and I just realized I'd much rather have prime. For me personally, I don't find myself really using all the focal lengths on a zoom lens. For say the 70-200, I usually shoot at 200 when I'm shooting landscapes, because if I'm using that lens, I usually want to zoom in really close on a particular part of a mountain or a field or whatever I'm shooting. I'm usually at 180 plus, not gonna lie. And when it comes to the 16-35, while 16mm was fun when I first got the lens, I don't find it particularly useful for my style of photography. I don't like wide shots like that. I much more often am at the 35 focal length or 28. I don't really like shooting at 16. It was fun while it lasted. It was great for weddings because of just the tightness of like dance floors, but I much prefer shooting at 35mm, and that's why I like having a 35mm prime. As my style of photography changes over the years and evolves, I do really find myself gravitating more towards the prime lenses. Even at the end of my wedding career, I was gravitating more towards my 50, my 85, my 105. I much preferred using those lenses, and then when it came to the reception and the dance floor, I'd slap on the 16-35 and rock that all night long. But that's not the point. The point is I prefer the results that I get out of the primes. Even if I'm not shooting wide open at 1.8 or 1.4, the image seems to me to be much better out of the primes, and that is my personal experience with my personal equipment, with my camera brand that I choose to shoot with, it's not gonna be the same across the board. And honestly, the next time I go traveling, whenever that may be, once the Yorona is over, I honestly see myself just bringing between 2 and 3 primes with me. I don't really wanna bring a zoom. If I'm gonna vlog, I'm gonna bring my M50 with that kit lens because it's tiny, or the 22 because it's tinier. And then for photography, I just wanna bring my 35 and like my 85. I don't really wanna bring anything else because it's so much lighter than carrying around the zoom lenses. So I like the results I get better from primes. I like the weight difference that I get from the primes. And it just makes a difference to me. So hopefully that helps you out too. I have been switching lenses on you throughout this whole video. I've been using the 35 prime and the 16 to 35 zoom. I haven't been telling you that I've been switching, but you might have noticed because both lenses do have a different color cast, and I'm not quite sure at this point in time how I'm gonna correct it to match perfectly. But let me know down in the comments if you noticed, because I've been switching and I just kind of want to have fun with that as part of the example of this video. But that being said, let's now get into some examples between the two lenses. Let's go. All right, so now we're on the 35mm prime shooting at f1.8. I had to throw on a variable emission filter to bring the aperture wide open to 1.8, but can you see how much different the background looks now than it did at f4? I'll throw the f4 on the screen next to this 1.8 so you can see the difference in the background and just the overall sharpness of myself and the bokeh in the background. So now let's throw on the zoom lens and put that to f4. I'm gonna put the two images next to each other. So I'm just gonna stand here awkwardly for a few seconds so I can put this next to the f4. All right, so now we're on the 16 to 35 zoom lens shooting at f4. Let me know if you see the difference in the background. Like, really pay attention. Can you see the difference between the f4 and the 1.8? Because there is a massive difference between 1.8 and 4. I'm telling you that right now. In my many years of photography experience, there's just a big, big difference. So take a good look. Let me know what you think. All right, so could you see the difference in the 1.8 and the f4? I know I can, and I think the 1.8 just looks better. That's my personal preference. You don't need a wide open aperture for everything. It's just my personal taste, that's all it is. So let me know down in the comments what you thought looked better, or what you prefer, or if you don't really see that much of a difference in the end. So in the end, is one really better than the other? Are primes better than zooms, and are zooms better than primes? I'm gonna say no. I don't think one is better than the other. I think it really depends on your specific needs, what you need for that shoot, what you need for that job, which I guess is a shoot, but just what you like, what you need, and what your demands are is gonna depend on the situation, and that's gonna make your decision for you. Nowadays, I much prefer primes, but when I was shooting weddings, I much preferred zooms for most of my wedding career. So it's just really subjective, and just boils down to what your needs are, what your preferences are, and that's it. It's all preference, just like most things in life. So don't think too much. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you prefer one over the other? Do you have both? I mean, do you own primes and zooms? I feel like most people do. Let me know. All right, so I think I've got my point across. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any further comments or questions about primes versus zoom, feel free to leave a comment down below. Or if you just want to talk about prime lenses and or zoom lenses, leave a comment. I'll get back to you and we can have a nice little conversation about the two. If you liked the video, please drop a like, it helps the channel. If you don't like me, feel free to dislike. That's fine too, just be honest with me. If you're curious about any of the gear that I use to make my videos, I'll have Amazon affiliate links down in the description. If you click one, it brings you to Amazon. If you buy anything, I get a small commission at no extra charge to you. It doesn't cost you a dime, just helps the channel keep growing so I can keep making videos to hopefully help you out. Please subscribe for more content. And if you made it this far in the video, comment tacos as usual, and I will see you all on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Totally awesome that you're here. Bye.